So now we turn to Roger Scruton, and as I said, everything in this reading, down almost to every single sentence, is Scruton explaining Aristotle through an example of sexual morality. Or another way to put that is Scruton really thinks that Aristotle had it right about human excellence and morality. So he's applying that to the specific human pursuit, I guess you could say, which is sexual activity. And so if it works for anger and it works for friendship and how to be a good parent and how to be a good cop and all that stuff, it should work on how to be a good significant other. Okay. So a few things to get out of the way first. One is that when Scruton's talking about erotic union is his technical term, or when I say things about sex today, we don't mean just, genital to genital contact. Oh, here's another thing about today's course. If this makes you uncomfortable, sorry, but I'm not teaching it in order to sort of scandalize you or make you feel uncomfortable, but because this is an important issue for a lot of people. A lot of people think that ethics has a lot to do with how you treat other people sexually. So if it's making you blush, I'm sorry, but stick with it. Maybe use your headphones instead of your speakers. But I do apologize if it makes you uncomfortable, but it's something we have to do. Okay. Back to my original point I was making, is that when I say sex today, or when Scruton's talking about sexual relationships or erotic union, it doesn't just mean genital to genital sexual contact. It means sexual things in general. So all the physical stuff that comes with a relationship is the kinds of things that he's going to be referring to. So, with Aristotle, you know how it works. You do something well if you do it neither too much nor too little. So not too much and not too little. What that's going to mean for sex is don't have too much sex because you'll be messing up some important human goal. Don't have too little sex because you'll be messing up the same important human goal in a different way. But, like I said, that doesn't just mean, count the number of partners who you've had, sex in the most blunt, specific way. But all those sorts of things. Relationships, we might say, as long as there's some physical component to them. Now, I think that's just important to get out of the way, because when we talk about virginity and should you be a virgin until you're married, until you find the one, etc., that will be relevant to Scruton, but neither he nor I are just talking about like losing your virginity today, but making out with a bunch of people, all that stuff. Okay, so the basic lesson will be what I just said today. Scruton says sex, like everything else, has a goal. That is, there's something good about sexual contact, about physical relationships, but there's better and worse ways to get that good thing. Right? There will be, as it turns out, an extreme, excessive way to pursue the goods of sexual relationships, which is bad precisely because it messes up your chances of getting those good things. And there's another way that's an extreme, but it's a defect or deficiency that also is bad because the goal that sex sets for itself, or the good things we might get out of sexual relationships, are confounded or prevented if you go about it in the wrong, defective, deficient, too little sort of way. Like I said, that's our sort of, for this recording, that's the core point. But as always, we add details to that. And as good philosophers, we say why that might be true. Not just Scruton and Aristotle say it's so. Because, honestly, why do you care what they think, right? We're going to supply the why that might be true. And then if you believe the why, then you might believe the idea and use it to guide your own life. Okay? So once more, it's not about authority. It's not just write down what they said. It's always in our class about what are the reasons they think what they said is true. And when you find those reasons compelling, when you think they're good reasons, good. Now you have another truth that you can incorporate into your life. If you don't find the reasons compelling, then you can reject the claim. That's how philosophy works. So, this is what Scruton, this next point is implied, but it's important to connect it to Aristotle. Remember all the stuff we said about human nature? And I've asked you what, if anything, you think might be shared by all human beings. Well, one thing that some people will say is a desire for sex is shared universally in all human beings. Or a related claim is that we all need to love and be loved. Now, if you believe that basically all human beings have a sexual desire once they hit puberty, adolescence, and or if you think that all human beings desire to love and be loved, and or if you think that basically everyone's life goes better, that is, they're happier if they love and are loved, then you're on board with Scruton and Aristotle so far. So for them to say human nature, they don't mean that absolutely every single darn person needs to love and be loved. They don't mean that absolutely every single darn person, like exactly 7 billion and change, however many people we have now, feels exactly the same sexual desire, and that everyone's life would be ruined if they don't have sex. No. What they mean is darn near every single person. We'll say, I'll make up a number, 99.5% of people, their lives go better when they feel loved and feel like they love someone. And 99.5% of people is that if they had satisfying sexual relationships with someone they cared about, they would live a happier, more fulfilled life. Right? So we don't want to point to exceptions and say that means there's nothing in common. Right? What they mean when they say human nature is that it's pretty darn common. It's not 50% of people. It's 99.5%. And yes, you will always be able to point to someone. Oh, this person's asexual. Like the singer Morrissey from this band, The Smiths. He says he's asexual. He says he just doesn't. Nope, it's not for him. Okay. That's one person out of 7 billion. And then there's some people who say, no, I'm an independent person. I don't need to love or be loved. I'm like a cyborg. Okay, I bet that person exists. But ask the rest of your friends. They probably say, yeah, I'm lonely right now because it's been a while since I've had a girlfriend or boyfriend. Right? So that's what we're talking about here. It's fun and enlightening to talk about the counterexamples. Don't get me wrong. You should bring those up. My point, though, is that if we find one or two counterexamples for their point, they're just going to say, yeah, but what about everybody else? So let me restate this one more time and then we'll move on. They're talking about general patterns of what it means to be a human being. Right? They're saying this is generally how human beings are. This is our general guide to how to live life. What people often do is they'll find an exception to the general rule, which is fine, and then say, so there's no general guide to life because I found an exception to the rule. But, you know what I mean? Spud Webb used to be this basketball player. He's called Spud because he's little, like a potato, like a spud potato. Okay? He was great at basketball. The general rule, though, is that people shorter than average are not going to be in the NBA. You wouldn't point to Spud Webb and then say, who knows what makes a good basketball player? Could be anything. You'd say, if anything, oh, he's the exception which proves the rule. Because you notice his shortness and you go, wow, that's crazy. So my point is this. We do want to come up with counterexamples because it'll help us think about the reading. But don't think that if you come up with a counterexample that it then means it's impossible for there to be human nature. Everybody's different. Because the whole point is that most people are exactly the same. They want sex, they want to be loved. And even when we go about those things differently, most people want to be loved by one person at a time. They don't want that person loving other people at the same time. And most people have an interest in doing that relatively long term. Not just one and done, but spending some real time with that person. Right? That's pretty widely shared across human beings. And anyways, now I'm drawing the point to a close. That's what they mean, is that this is a pretty darn reliable guide to life, even though there are some exceptions. Okay. So, back to it. Remember with Aristotle, I said to do something well, you need a good goal, and you need to execute it well. It's a little hard in Aristotle to say what makes a goal good or not. But basically, he and Scruton are going to say this. Some goals are just fitting or appropriate for human beings. And usually they're pretty obvious. So I want to ask you all. Do you think it's a fitting or appropriate goal for human beings to kill other innocent human beings? For no reason at all? No. No, I don't. And do you think that nature programmed human beings to kill other innocent human beings at random for no good reason whatsoever? No, even with all the war in the world, it seems like, I mean, war is, bad usually, but it seems like people think that there's some good reason behind what they do. So once more, Aristotle and Scruton are going to say, in this case, the goal has been set for human beings by human nature, you might say. So, you don't wake up one day and just decide that you're into sex. You don't just wake up one day and say, well, let's see, I need a new hobby. Maybe I should start listening to German techno. No, that doesn't sound good. Oh, maybe I should think that sex is desirable. Okay, I'll try that out. No, it's just, there's a clock in us, and once you hit puberty, nature makes you want sexual activity. Right? It's a fitting, appropriate thing for human beings. Probably because we're mammals and that's how we reproduce, but leave that aside. For whatever reason, look around, and once people are past 15, whenever it happens, right? They start having these desires. It's natural. It's good for us, right? And it's in almost every single one of us. So Aristotle says you need a decent goal and you need to execute it well. Scruton's just going to say, hey, look, all of us want sex. That implies that there's something okay about it. Just like you want to eat. Yeah, it's good for you to want to eat. Now the task will be to find out how to do it well. Right? How to pursue this legitimate goal, this appropriately human goal of sexual relationships, and how to do it in the best possible way. Right? So you know what the general Aristotle answer is going to be. Well, don't do it in extreme ways. Don't do it, generally speaking, too much or too little. Okay. But what would make it too much or too little? And I really, really want you to see this point. So if you're only listening and not taking notes, this is definitely something you should take notes on. Okay? Extremes are always bad for Aristotle and Scruton because they mess up the chances of achieving the goal that they're trying to pursue. They are not bad because they're sinful or immoral. They're not bad because they're yucky or they might get you an STD, right? The extreme is bad because it messes up the goal that it is trying to pursue. So Aristotle's example is that of an archer. Every archer wants to hit the center of the target. That's the golden mean. Just like every person wants to be good and virtuous and excellent. If you pull on the bow too hard of the bow and arrow, you're still trying to hit the target, right? But if you pull back too hard, you will overshoot the target and you won't hit the bullseye. You'll hit the very top and get few points, right? So your goal of hitting the bullseye is messed up if you pull the bow too hard. Same, the goal of hitting the bullseye is also missed if you don't pull enough on the bowstring. Then it doesn't have enough force and it lands too low on the target. You also miss the bullseye. The badness is always relative to the goal. Let me say that again. Badness for Aristotle is always relative to the goal. Meaning, things are bad for Aristotle and Scruton if and only if they mess up the goal which they're trying to achieve. So, to say why too much and too little sex are bad, we have to figure out what the real goal of sexual activity is. And this is when it gets sort of interesting. So I want you to pause the recording now and say two things. I want you to think about two things. One is, what do you think the goal of sexual activity is? Okay, and this one's very much officially, what do you think the goal of sexual activity is? Or another way to put this is, what's the point of sexual activity? Another way to put this is, what, if anything, is good about sexual activity? Another way, I don't mean to pile on the synonyms, but here's another one. Another way to put this is, what's the motivation behind sexual activity? Why do people pursue it? And then that just links up to the first way to put it. What's the real goal behind sexual activity? So pause the recording now and think about that for a while. What do you personally think the goal of sexual activity is? Why do people do it? What good things come out of sexual activities? Okay, and hopefully you pause because now I'm going to ask you a follow-up question to that. Okay, so that's what you think. What, from what we've read in Aristotle so far, do you think he would say the goal of sexual activity is? You can do Scruton if you'd like for this, since they're so similar. But since I'm about to tell you what Scruton's answer is, maybe just do it through Aristotle. What do you think Aristotle would say the goal or point of sexual activity is? Now, don't just say, well, Aristotle's smart like me. He'd say the same things as me. Based on what Aristotle says in the other parts of the text. From that, what do you think he would say? So not just what do you think a good answer is, because you already answered that for yourself, but Aristotle, the kinds of things he's concerned with. What do you think he would think the goal or reason or motivation or good achieved by sexual activity is? Okay, so now I'm going to give you Scruton's, which is his version of Aristotle. Scruton says that one of the things it means to be human, that is, our human nature, is that we're what he calls embodied subjects. And it basically means what it sounds like. Embodied just means you're really in, or you're really in your body. In an important way, you're defined by your body. So Scruton says human nature is to be a body and a mind sort of mixed up together in the same subject or person. That just is human nature. And that's pretty hard to deny, isn't it? It sure the heck seems that way. With Aristotle, agreeing with Aristotle, Scruton says the same thing. Human nature is one thing. To be a good person means to do that human nature in the best possible way. So, if you are a mind and a body, all mixed together in the same subject, how would you go about doing that well? it seems like what you'd have to do is you'd have to give your mind the stuff it needs to be a mind, and you'd have to give your body the stuff it needs to be a body. Or another way to put this is if the fact of human nature is to be a body and a mind at the same time, to do that excellently probably means to get those two very different things working together, each doing their own part in the best possible way. Remember, all these ideas are connected. This is us working towards saying what the goal of sexual activity is for Scruton, so that we can know when we achieve that goal well and when we don't, so that we can tell which extremes prevent achieving that goal and should therefore be avoided. So Scruton says you are a body and a mind together. If you want to be a good human, you have to get them to work well together. And sexuality is done well when you give your body what it needs as a body, which is sexual stuff, but with the input and the guidance of the mind. So once more, to be a human nature means we're embodied, we're minds and physical bodies at the same time. To be a good human means to get those things to work together well, even though they're quite different. For sexuality, that's going to mean is that you're going to indulge your physical desires so that your body gets what it needs, but with the guidance or input of the mind. So the mind will tell the body the best way for the body to act. It's not mind against body. That would just be the mind saying, no sex for you, ever. You dirty animal, no sex for you, ever. But that's not good sex for Aristotle and Scruton. That would be defect or deficiency, right? So with the guidance, with like an advisory role, the mind will tell the body, yes, have sex, but not too much and not too little. That's when you're a good human being. Now, this is all the threads of Aristotle. A day and a half, right? Or a whole big chunk of reading, right? All of it drawn together and then changing all the words because we're using sex as an example. So I bet this part is maybe moving really fast or is otherwise confusing. If it's still confusing at the end, always send me an email. In fact, don't even wait until the end. Send me an email as soon as you're confused. And then even if you resolve it later, that's fine. Send it as soon as you have a question. So, this is what it's going to be for Scruton, is that you have a good goal, which is sexual desire. You want to consummate relationships where you care about someone with physical activities. But, like all natural bodily desires, if you're going to do it well, you don't just let the body run amok doing whatever the heck it wants to do. You also don't deny the body. You will not be happy if you stop eating. You will not be happy, according to them, if you stop having sex. Okay? So it's somewhere in between. You don't want to indulge every bodily whim. Every time your body gets excited, if you let it act, that's going to be too much sexual activity. Why will it be too much? Why will it be bad? Because then you're breaking the bond of mind and body. Because when the body does whatever it wants, it can't listen to the mind. So I'll say that again. Like I said, I know this moves. It's a lot of moving pieces here. Too much sex would be the equivalent of letting your body have whatever it desired. Now that means that mind and body aren't in a good partnership, because that means the body is running the show 100%. It sort of kidnaps the mind, right? On the other hand, defect and deficiency would also be bad teamwork. It would break that sort of fusion of mind and body, which is the union of erotic union. Because just like you don't want the body in full control of your sexual desires, you don't want the mind in full control of your sexual desires. Because the mind will probably just say, that's not a very good use of time. Or the mind might say, oh, you might get your heart broken, you better stay away. That would be defect or deficiency. You will not be happy in life if you run away from every physical encounter because your mind is scared or grossed out. You'll be missing out on something, right? Okay. So, this is what Scruton says. He says, the most important goal of human sexuality, as strange as it sounds, is that you make your mind and body this solid team. That you get your body's desires indulged some, but don't let your body run the show. And also that you let your mind have some say, like, really, body? You want to have sex with this person? They're in a motorcycle gang. You really think that's a good idea? You let your mind give some input about when, where, whom, with, all these sorts of things. And then the body gets what it needs, and the mind gets what it needs, which is to be rational. So, an example I like to give is this. Okay, there's two examples. One is that there's these bomb-sniffing dogs, right, in the military and in police forces. Dogs, as a physical body, can do things that you and I can't. They can smell things that you and I can't. And it's good when they do that, right? It prevents terrorist bombs from going off in crowded places. That's fantastic. But if you just take a dog, a natural dog with no training, and put it in a public place because you're trying to find a bomb, that dog's not going to find anything. Right? What would a dog without any training, the dog is like your physical desires here. What would a dog without any training do if you let it loose in a public place? It would probably urinate on a fire hydrant. It would sniff other dogs. It would try to eat out of the garbage, right? That's what your sexual desire will do if you don't control it a little bit with your mind. It will be a bad dog. Running amok, biting people, whatever it might be. But with the proper training, and this is dog and human being working together as a team, then the dog can do amazing stuff, which is good for the dog. It's loved and it's taken care of. It's eating healthy food at the police academy. And humans benefit from it too. You let the dog do dog stuff with some control, and that control comes from the human side of stuff. But you know, how do I say this? The metaphor can get a little strange sometimes since we're talking about sex, but you have to give the dog treats, right? You have to make the dog feel like it's getting something out of the bargain too. It can't just be all human all the time. So they have to work together as a team. So that's one example, is that if you train and get good sexual habits, your body will be like a human-animal team where both sides benefit and both sides do things that the other one can't. If you fail to train your sexual body, or if you get bad habits, and we all know the friend who's got that dog who's poorly trained, then your body will be like an untrained dog. It will be wild, hard to control, and it will do things that embarrass you. I won't go into graphic detail, but dogs can do disgusting things sometimes. So too can human beings who don't control their sexual desires a little bit. Have you ever woken up next to someone and be like, how the heck did I get here? Or have you ever had a relationship where the person was mean to you or otherwise you shouldn't be with them, but you kept going back because you were so physically attracted to them? If you haven't, you've seen movies with these sorts of characters, right? If you let your sexual body run amok, the problem for Aristotle and Scruton isn't that, oh, sex is bad, you shouldn't have sex. They don't care. That's not their issue. It's not for them that premarital sex is immoral or sinful. It's that if you let your sexual body run amok, you're hooking up with everyone, you never say no, there will get to be a point where you, not other people, but you yourself, will look at your body and the things you do with your body, and you will feel disgusted or embarrassed in the same way you'd be embarrassed of owning an untrained bad dog. That's the main danger in sexual ethics. It's that if you give the body complete control, it will do anything that feels good in the moment. And then you, as a whole embodied person, which includes a mind, will come to feel really grossed out by some of the things you've done later on. That's what Aristotle and Scruton think. Now, there is another danger to sexuality, but it's a lot more rare. And that's the person who has a deficiency in terms of sex. They have too little, and that causes the problem as well. So this would be like never taking your dog for a walk. Hey, it's an animal, man. It has to get out there and smell stuff and leave its markings and stretch its legs. If you never take the car out of the garage, it's not a very happy car, right? If you never let the dog off the leash, it's not going to be a very happy dog. Same thing with sexuality. You have these desires. If you fight them your whole life, or you never ever indulge them, you will suffer for it. You will feel crappy. So, that happens less often, but that's the other danger. That's the defect. We're all more familiar with the excessive relationship to sexuality. Okay, so a few more questions for you. Remember, in the discussion board, you can talk about whatever you want. I give you these questions in case comments haven't popped into your head yet, give you something to talk about. So, a few questions I want to ask you around, okay, how do we apply this? And some of them will be about what you think, and some of them, in this case, will be about applying Scruton. What, for Scruton, do you think the right number of sexual partners is? And remember, don't just say what you think might be a decent idea, but based on the stuff you read, what do you think, adding all that together, Scruton would say about the number of appropriate sexual partners? Maybe it's one, right? Maybe it's every person you really, really are attracted to. Maybe it's only one person at a time. Maybe it's as many people at a time as you genuinely feel a connection to. That would be unusual, but that might be what he means. Or maybe it's just like, it's everyone you actually love. Once you love someone, work it out. So what do you think Scruton would say? Because you notice he doesn't come right out. It's not like he gives a number or he gives an exact rule. When this happens, then you should have sex with this person. So what do you all think Scruton would say? If there's a number, what's the number? If there's a set situation that it's appropriate to have sex and other situations when it's not? Is marriage part of this? Are kids part of this? What do you think? Fill in the blanks for Scruton. Okay? So that's something you can talk about in the discussion, and you'll all probably have slightly different answers, but we'll see if they end up gelling around a certain sort of consensus. Okay, so I hope that wasn't too much today. I know some of us are still sort of getting our legs underneath us in the beginning of the term, but really, all Scruton is giving content and filling out what Aristotle said by using the specific example of sexual desire. So this is the thing. If you have a confusion about either one of them, think about what the other one said and see if you can move from one to the other. because they should support and back each other up on almost every single point. Okay, so that will be the question I want you to address through Scruton. Try to give a more precision to what's too much and too little for him. And then that's our recording. That's our session on Scruton and continuing Aristotle. Okay, thank you, everyone.